Hello my dear viewers, I would like to thank you for watching the video, and I wanted to say subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be very grateful and you will not miss new videos. Enjoy the video. My name is Daniel Harris. I work as a night shift security guard at a downtown office building in Seattle. It's a boring job, but it pays the bills. Most nights, I spend my time staring at the security monitors, walking empty halls, and counting the hours until sunrise. But last week, something happened that I can't explain. It started with a key. It was late, just after midnight. I was doing my usual rounds on the second floor when I noticed something strange on the floor near one of the elevators, a small brass key. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. It looked old, with intricate designs etched into the metal. At first, I thought someone had dropped it. But this was a secure building. Only employees with ID cards could get in, and I was the only one on duty. Curious, I slipped the key into my pocket and finished my rounds. Later, as I was reviewing the security footage, I noticed something strange. The camera near the elevator showed me walking by and picking up the key. But just before I arrived, the screen flickered. For a split second, the elevator door opened, and someone stepped out. I rewound the footage, my pulse quickening. The camera feed wasn't clear, just a grainy black and white image, but I could see enough. The elevator doors slid open and a figure stepped out. They were tall, dressed in dark clothing, their face hidden in the shadows. They moved quickly, heading down the hall and out of frame. I stared at the screen, rewinding again and again. The time stamp showed 12:03 a.m., just minutes before I found the key. But here's the thing, the elevators are locked at night. No one can access them without a key card. And when I checked the logs, there was no record of anyone entering the building. The key in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. I pulled it out, studying it under the fluorescent lights. The intricate etchings formed a pattern, spirals and lines that seemed almost deliberate. I decided to test it. The building has dozens of locked rooms, some that even I don't have access to. Most of them are empty storage spaces used for old files and equipment. On a whim, I tried the key on one of the doors on the second floor. It turned easily. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, dusty room. Rows of shelves lined the walls, filled with old files and forgotten office supplies. At first, it seemed unremarkable, but as I stepped inside, my flashlight caught something unusual. In the corner of the room was a small metal box. It looked ancient, its surface tarnished and scratched. A combination lock was built into the front, the numbers worn smooth from use. I reached out to touch it, but the moment my fingers brushed the surface, the lights in the room flickered, and then I heard it. A faint sound coming from somewhere behind me, footsteps. I spun around, flashlight trembling in my hand. The room was empty, the door still ajar. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing off the walls. No response. I turned back to the box, my chest tightening. The combination lock had changed. 3 numbers now glowed faintly on the dial. 197. My breath caught. That was the code to the breakroom safe, a detail I'd never shared with anyone. My hands shook as I twisted the numbers into place. With a soft click, the lock released and the box creaked open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in half. I unfolded it, my stomach churning as I read the words scrawled across the page. "Why did you take the key?" Before I could react, the door slammed shut behind me. The sound of the door slamming made me jump, my flashlight shaking in my grip. "Who's there?" I shouted, spinning toward the sound. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the overhead lights, which flickered like they were struggling to stay on. I turned back to the paper in my hand. "Why did you take the key?" The question clawed at my mind. I didn't even know what the key was for. Why was it here? Who had left it? And more importantly, what had I gotten myself into? I folded the paper and shoved it into my pocket. Grabbing the key from the door, I took one last look at the metal box. The inside was empty now, as if the note was all it ever held. I needed answers. I hurried back to the security office, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I rewound the footage again, this time focusing on the figure from the elevator. Frame by frame, I watched them step out, the dark clothing blending into the shadows. But as they moved down the hallway, something caught my eye. The figure wasn't walking, they were gliding. Their movements were smooth, unnatural, like they weren't touching the ground at all. My stomach twisted as I paused the video, zooming in on their face. It was blurred. Completely indistinct, like a smear of static on the screen. I scrubbed forward, watching as the figure disappeared around the corner. When I switched to the next camera feed, they were gone, vanished. I sat back, my mind racing. The key, the figure, the note, it all felt like a puzzle I couldn't solve. That's when I noticed the key in my hand. The etchings on the brass weren't just random patterns. They looked deliberate, like they formed something, a map, maybe. I grabbed a piece of paper and traced the design, connecting the spirals and lines into something coherent. When I was done, my blood ran cold. The key wasn't a map, it was a symbol. The design matched an old emblem I'd seen in one of the locked rooms on the 3rd floor. I didn't want to go back out there. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to throw the key away and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't. Grabbing my flashlight, I headed to the 3rd floor. The room in question was at the end of the hallway, its door marked with a faded plaque that read maintenance. When I reached it, I hesitated, my heart pounded as I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, the door creaking open to reveal a pitch-black space. I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The room was filled with old equipment, broken monitors, rusted tools, and piles of forgotten junk. But at the far end of the room, something stood out. A steel hatch was embedded in the floor, its surface engraved with the same symbol as the key. My breath caught as I knelt down, tracing the grooves with my fingers. The hatch had no handle, no obvious way to open it. But as I held the key closer, the etchings began to glow faintly. And then, with a soft click, the hatch unlocked. The air that seeped out was cold, carrying a faint metallic tang. I shone my flashlight into the opening, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. From somewhere below, I heard a sound, a whisper. The whispering grew louder as I stared into the darkness below. It wasn't a single voice, it was many, layered and overlapping, like a crowd murmuring just out of earshot. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the hatch. I didn't want to go down there, but something pulled me forward. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, the air growing colder with every step. My flashlight flickered, its beams struggling to cut through the heavy darkness. The whispering didn't stop. It surrounded me, echoing off the narrow walls, the voices indistinct yet urgent. At the bottom of the stairs was a small, circular room carved out of stone. The walls were smooth, damp, and lined with faintly glowing symbols the same pattern as the key. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it sat another metal box identical to the one I'd found earlier. This one had no lock. I hesitated, my breath visible in the freezing air. The whispering grew louder, the voices rising to frantic pitch. With shaking hands, I opened the box. Inside was a folded piece of paper just like before. But this time, the message was different. You were warned. The lights on my flashlight died, plunging the room into total darkness. My chest tightened as the whispers became screams, the sound pressing in from all sides. And then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the staircase. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the void. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, from the darkness, a voice spoke. "You shouldn't have taken the key." It was the same voice I'd heard on the security footage, cold, detached, and unnervingly calm. A faint glow appeared at the base of the stairs, revealing a figure standing at the edge of the room. It was the person from the elevator, tall, featureless, their face still obscured. But as they stepped closer, something changed. Their features began to sharpen, to shift. Until they looked exactly like me, I stumbled back, my legs hitting the pedestal. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice trembling. The figure smiled, an expression I knew all too well. "You've already given it to me." Before I could respond, they lunged forward, their hand outstretched. The room spun, the symbols on the walls flaring to life, blinding me with their intensity. And then, nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the security office. The monitors hummed quietly, each screen showing empty hallways and elevators. I sat up, my head pounding. My pocket was empty, the key was gone. At first, I thought it was over. Maybe it had all been some bizarre nightmare. But when I turned to the main monitor, my blood ran cold. The camera feed from the second floor showed a figure standing by the elevator. They were tall, dressed in dark clothing, and they looked exactly like me.